Hello, welcome back to episode 2 of the Critical Conversation. Today is Sunday, the 9th of February, and I am currently being joined by my co-hosts Ted and Liam.
Hello there.
So where we are examining political issues and cultural issues critically. So, this past week, obviously the biggest thing in the news was, the State of the Union address.
And also the, Trump no longer under the impeachment process.
Mhm.
It was annulled.
While that was a more predictable outcome, it was
Still very exciting.
headline making, yes. Now, obviously the biggest thing in the news this week was Pelosi's tearing up of the President Trump's speech, which was honestly just highly degrading and honestly childish. Just her display of anger.
It's a very telling thing. That's not at all the way that a politician should be acting. They
also
should be
illegal, isn't it?
Well, yeah, there was actually
it's a congressional document.
this is more particular, but she did destroy an official government document. 18 U.S. Code 2071 states, quote, "Whoever having the custody of any such document, paper, or other thing, willfully and unlawfully conceals, removes, mutilates, obliterates, falsifies, or destroys the same, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 3 years, or both, and shall forfeit his office and be disqualified from holding any office under the United States," end quote. I mean, obviously,
There's the key word. It says his. Feminists get away yet again.
obviously this isn't going to come into anything. People called this nitpicky and how it wasn't an official document. But if you do your homework, it wasn't just a photocopy. It was an official document signed by the president to be filed with Congress as a permanent record.
And again, she's the Speaker of the House, and so she should not be behaving that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's the state of affairs in modern politics, I suppose. People are no longer cordial.
Right. It's about the agenda.
No longer policy versus policy, it's party versus party.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately many are more focused on their hatred of other people than they are on their willingness to actually do what they can to better the country. And a lot of them, there are several candidates running on the entire premise that they will attempt to beat the current president. And that's not really where we should be, I don't think.
Because they're barely even focusing on policy. They're only focusing on getting Trump out of the office.
Mm-hmm.
So in many cases, you have to wonder, well, does that mean that you're going to have no idea what to do when you get back into office? Or are you just going to be like, well, we defeated Trump, now what?
Yeah, or like in the case of Warren, when she actually announced how she would pay for her policy plans and what they would actually cost, she immediately, in the polls, took a dip. So maybe in some of their cases, maybe not actually telling people about their policies is a good idea.
Right. And the thing is, ripping it up was unlawful, but it was also just degrading to the country in general.
Completely immoral. And I think it definitely displays how much she is just against Trump. It's not even that she's against his morals, because every single thing that he was listing off in the State of the Union address, the Democrats should have been for it. They should have been cheering.
Because
for the lower, I was happy about many of the things, including the unemployment rate going down. That's a good thing, especially in minority communities. They very heavily, many of their policies are focused around those minority communities.
Right.
Because it's coming from Trump.
Exactly.
Right. See, African American poverty. He said that African American poverty has declined to the lowest rate ever recorded, and not a single Democrat congressman applauded.
And yet,
it's just, if it was coming from anyone else's mouth,
and
they would be
a great
fine
many
with it.
Republicans stood and clapped, which I would think that a racist would not be very happy about that.
Exactly. Which means they have no standing to call us the racist party.
Yeah. I don't think name calling should be a part at all of politics.
Right.
There's definitely, Trump has had his fair share of name calling, which I don't think is appropriate. But
not on a political stage.
Yeah. But at least from what I see, most of his is limited to other politicians and public figures, rather than labeling entire voter bases as racist or ignorant.
or deplorable.
Yeah, I think the
basket of deplorables.
I think the biggest issue I had with her tearing it up is she really tore up all the stories that were in it. She tore up the last surviving Tuskegee Airmen. She ripped up the survival of a child born 20 weeks early. She shredded the mourning families of a woman kidnapped and murdered by ISIS, as well as a man whose brother was killed by a monstrous illegal alien who was, by the way, only allowed to go on his killing spree because of a sanctuary city. She also destroyed a service member's reunion with his family, and a young black girl who, fatherless, was given full scholarship by the president. These aren't even all of the wonderful stories and accomplishments, and they belong to the American people, not Nancy Pelosi. They were not hers to destroy.
Exactly. They weren't all entirely Trump's either. They were the American people's.
Exactly. So when she does this, she doesn't only take a stance against Trump, she gets a stance against
the American people.
Exactly. I mean, half those people were African American. Is that really not worth standing and applauding? Congresswoman Ilhan Omar would not stand for the black 100-year-old Tuskegee Airman and his great-grandson who wanted to be in the Space Force.
Yeah. I mean, that's impressive. That takes a lot of effort to get to where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And for her to reject what he's accomplished during a time when many of his people were not allowed to accomplish that it's admirable that he would do that, but it's very disappointing that she would reject that in the way she did.
Yeah, there were some very touching stories during the speech, like the one of the child that was born only halfway into what would have been considered a proper pregnancy, which, just a quick sneak peek for next week's discussion, Democrats believe in abortion up to the moment of birth, basically, or at least
Not
Ralph.
all of them, but there are a few.
Governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, believes that up to the moment of birth, abortion should be legal, and even if you believe that halfway through abortion should be legal, they just showed
could survive on its own.
Exactly, they just showed that this is actually a child. It's not like up until a month before; it's just this blob.
Yeah.
But anyway, like I said, that will be next week, and we're actually excited. We have a guest speaker coming in for that.
Nancy Pelosi was not the only Democratic politician to act out against Trump's speech. She was not the only one to reject it, and the only one to be filled with anger.
Right, there were several that just really made it about politics and not about success of the union.
One such case was Rashida Tlaib. She was, in a quote, triggered by Brett Kavanaugh when Trump mentioned Brett Kavanaugh, and then she walked out on the State of the Union address, which Brett Kavanaugh was not. That at that point there was still much of the speech to go and many things to still be celebrated. She told MSNBC on Tuesday that the reason she walked out of President Donald Trump's State of the Union speech was that she was triggered by the mention of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And here's her quote: "I think, even the mention of Brett Kavanaugh for me is a trigger. Just as a woman in America, the fact that he, was rightfully accused, and having public and the world and tell her story of sexual assault by this person was appointed to the Supreme Court is just alone that I couldn't stand and not do anything about it. And I need to just walk away from that."
Right.
That grammatically was very difficult to read. You heard me stumbling over that. There were no pauses in that sentence. It was just one long go on.
The thing about her is she's obviously assuming belief of the supposed victim without any evidence or proof, because Judge Kavanaugh was not convicted on any crimes, and yet she assumes him to be completely guilty. And so that was completely partisan, and that went hand in hand with partisanship as far as Trump's acquittal in this whole impeachment process.
She also participated in a protest during the speech, raising her hand, raising 3 fingers, and chanting HR3, together with fellow left-wing Squad members, Representative Ilhan Omar, and others.
Yeah, well, let me explain what that was. H.R. 3 is a bill that they were currently trying to pass that would basically lower prescription drug prices, and it was kind of hard to understand why they would bring this up now, because at that moment Trump was saying that his administration was now allowing coverage for pre-existing conditions. Basically, if you have a condition and you go on healthcare later, they'll still cover it. Which, first of all, they didn't clap or stand for, which they didn't for most of the speech, but then they stand up and use it as a chance to promote their bill. Basically ignoring the fact that he's done so much for the drug industry, the health industry.
Yeah, and healthcare overall.
Yeah. Yeah, but they'd rather be pushing their agenda of a $36 trillion national debt, Medicare for all.
Recently, it was on a post on Reddit by squad member Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. On a Reddit post, she questioned why the American people would be willing to fund Space Force and not her new bill, and which is again along the lines with this putting up her three fingers for H.R. 3, and it's, well, your bill is a little bit more expensive than what we would want, and the Space Force doesn't actually add any extra funding for the. I believe there's a few million added, but it's mainly pulled from the Air Force budget.
The thing, just a quick brief side note, we're not going to stay on this long about that, and also the Green New Deal, which she supposed. It's almost a decivilizaation, which is sort of what we touched on last week. They want to basically become retroactive and take away cars and planes, and actually the funny thing is how blatantly hypocritical these people are. You see nonstop posts about Bernie Sanders flying in on his $1 million jet to talk about and lecture you about your emissions.
The anti-millionaire on his $1 million jet.
Exactly, and then there's Mike Bloomberg, who owns, I think it's like 8 planes, 40 cars.
He isn't a socialist. He does not.
Yes, but he has given lectures on economy and emissions from cars as far as it goes.
The quote that I got earlier from the quote of Rashida Tlaib that was actually pulled from a Breitbart article written by Joel Pollack. So if you're interested in more of what he has to say, you can find him on Twitter at Joel Pollack, Pollak.
And then after the State of the Union, there was the traditional Democratic response. This was delivered by the Democratic governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, at her daughter's public high school. And she gave, honestly, I sat there and I critiqued it, a very vague speech about how Republicans are empty promises while the Democrats are getting, so much done. Even though the only thing she cites is the building of roads and bridges. And she blames this lack of responsibility on the government and saying that the Republicans weren't doing enough. And then she brought up the example of a 13-year-old boy up in Michigan who basically went out and fixed his own potholes with a shovel and a bucket of dirt.
Well, that's more on the state rather than the...
Yeah, and that's what's so ironic, is that she used that as a lever to attack the Republicans, when the irony is that that's her state and is basically her job to do what this boy was doing on his own.
That's more local authorities in that case.
Exactly. It's either government level or county, township level. And then she also stated, quote, "Every Democrat running for president has a plan to expand health care for all Americans. President Trump sadly has a different plan. He's asking the courts to rip those life-saving protections away. It's pretty simple. Democrats are trying to make your health care better. Republicans in Washington are trying to take it away," end quote. This woman clearly has no ability of retaining information from the address, since President Trump, as I said, he brought back coverage for pre-existing conditions. But obviously this agenda-minded, money-driven hack would rather stand with a healthcare plan that would launch us into trillions and trillions of dollars of national debt.
Yeah, And it's unproven that those plans work.
Or that they could be paid.
They can be. We've seen in other countries such as Canada or the United Kingdom that they can be paid for.
But
the problem is that the United Kingdom has less than a third of our population.
Exactly.
Similarly with Canada, which would make it far more expensive than the United States. But one thing that people don't often talk about is the quality of healthcare. While you may get it, most often things that you get for free are not the best of things.
Exactly. It's the same instance as welfare. They're basically trying to launch people onto more programs similar to that.
Yeah, it's it may give people healthcare, but it's not going to be good quality healthcare, and it will drag the rest of the nation's healthcare
Exactly.
down.
It'll be assembly line production, just one size fits all.
And one size does not fit all.
Exactly.
And that's not a good thing, I don't believe. There's something to be said. We do want those that are less fortunate to have access to healthcare, and I believe that there are several things that have been done in recent years with forcing hospitals to be transparent with the prices of different services. But
yeah, I think that's really good.
But I don't think that we should be spending that much on healthcare.
Well, certainly not. It's not really a right. It's hard to explain because they make it such an ethical issue, but then they also reject the fact that Trump has done very much for healthcare. Like I said, just the pre-existing conditions. He's also brought back a record income. Also,
average income has increased.
Exactly. Also, none of them they didn't stand for the unemployment of Hispanics, of whites, of youth, of Asian, of black. They wouldn't do it.
Yeah, and the unemployment is actually a good way to get everyone to have some sort of medical care. Yeah, because when you have a job, you now have enough income to be able to afford the costs of insurance. Right. And once you have insurance, insurance companies kind of work with hospitals to lower prices. So once you do have insurance, you can then afford most medical services. So if we really want to help them, what we got to do is we got to get that unemployment rate to nothing. Yeah, which is almost impossible.
Yeah, that's more aspirational. But if you look at the facts, President Trump is getting closer than anyone to that.
Exactly. So lowering it is always a good idea.
It's just sadly partisan that he's not credited with any of it.
Exactly. There's a lot of partisan politics right now. His
name is Trump.
Exactly. You just get the feeling that anything, no matter how good it is, if it comes from his mouth, then they basically negate the fact that it's good at all.
Exactly. And it's really not what we want.
And that's the reason that I believe that President Trump will win a second term, because real Americans, sensible Americans on both sides, are looking at that State of the Union and seeing. But it makes sense. Yeah. They should be clapping for this. They should be applauding this.
Yeah, the American citizens. There was a very the State of the Union address was there was a high approval rating for it. Very many people were rather excited to hear what he had to say and very happy. It gives them hope for the future, and honestly, that's what we need. Because when people lose hope, they stop fighting.
Right, exactly.
So as long as we have hope, then we'll have people who will fight for a better future. And when you when everybody fights for a better future.
And I believe the issue with Medicare for All and welfare is that if they can stamp their free label on it, that makes it amazing. And
yeah, a lot of people do like free stuff, including myself at times. But
exactly,
that free couch on the side of the road, maybe you don't want to pick that up.
Exactly,
that might not be the best couch to get. It may be free, but there's a reason why they dumped it on the side of the road.
And everything comes at a price.
Exactly.
Medicare comes with a tag the size of a phone number, almost literally. It's just.
It's a lot. It's a lot to be able to afford.
Right. Another large thing in the news recently was the Iowa Caucus. This was a huge mess.
This was a lot of trouble for the Democrats.
I was talking to a friend, actually that was going to be here on the show with us. I asked if he'd done preparation for the Iowa Caucus, and he said that he wasn't sure, and it was a bit confusing and vague to him. And I said,
Yeah, could you explain to us a bit what happened? And
Yeah.
what
Here,
made
I
it so disastrous?
I can talk a second about what so the Iowa Caucus, for those who don't know, is when deciding the candidates for the Democrat and Republican parties, each party will go around to different states, and they'll have the voters vote to say, this is who I want to represent my party. And Iowa is important because it's the first. That's where it all starts. That's the
Right.
first place that when the Iowa Caucus happens, that's when the election cycle begins for real. You
right.
have posturing beforehand and debates and other things, people trying to say, vote for me, this and this, but
Right.
this is really when the election cycle kicks off.
Right.
Right.
So for Donald Trump, it was a huge win, as even though he's uncontested, he broke the record for the most voters at the Iowa Caucus for Republican. when
Yeah,
he's speaking.
I saw a lot of commentary really pointing out that this has been a fantastic week for President Trump.
And a terrible week for the Democrats.
He had a
Yeah.
greatly, despite what they'd want you to think, he had a greatly accepted State of the Union speech. I think more than
Yeah.
53. His approval ratings shot up to 49, which is incredible for a president.
He won on less than 30%. So
Exactly. So honestly, I think also he had his impeachment acquittal. Can we talk a little bit about that?
well, we can get to that right after let's talk a little bit more about the Iowa Caucus
right.
since we got onto that.
Yeah.
So-
So what I heard that it was a disaster, that everything went wrong. Could you explain a little bit on how it went wrong and why?
So the Iowa Caucus began as it does normally on Monday. The voting began. Again, as they normally do. So the different people from the different counties and sectors of cities and other areas went to local schools and other places to vote, and they voted. Recently, this year, the Democrats used an app to vote for their candidate.
Right.
Now, this app is very interesting in that it was created by a company called Shadow. Now, if that is not the most dystopian-sounding name for a company,
That's a bit sketchy.
essentially they created voting machines, and they're called Shadow. That's
Yikes.
just slightly terrifying. But they, from what we can hear, from what we're told from what I've seen on the news, what happened was so that everyone voted, and the results were being live shown, and then all of a sudden it just showed 0% votes for everyone.
Right.
Bernie Sanders at that time was in fact in the lead, and Joe Biden, I believe, had a record low amount.
He had a terrible.
It was very sad. But not that I want him to win. It's just he's rather sad to see a politician getting almost no votes.
Right.
But so they all of a sudden dropped to 0. There were no longer results being shown. People were understandably upset. And what was later shown on the news and other things is that the voting company had apparently found an issue with the voting system.
Right.
It's unknown what that was. Just believe that one person came forward and said they found an issue with it, so they stopped the whole thing. If their issue was there or not, it's unknown. There was very limited information.
Right.
But to solve the problem, they still needed votes. So what they decided to do was each county would flip coins to decide
Right.
who the victor
It's-
was.
Yeah.
And there are videos showing this online of people flipping coins. Now, the interesting thing is it's not they don't actually show the camera what the coin flip result was.
Right.
You just one or two people deciding who won.
They leave it up to chance.
Yeah, they flip it, and what ended up happening was Pete Buttigieg, I can't say his name. Nobody can.
Bougie.
That's why they call him Mayor Pete, huh?
Mayor Pete. Yeah, just call him Mayor Pete.
Mayor Pete.
So Mayor Pete, he had won apparently, but why this is interesting is because the company Shadow, one of the primary investors, is Mayor Pete himself. Now
That's
this is where, admittedly, there are some conspiracy theories, but
right.
the seemingly the amount of coincidences that may have happened kind of point to them being true in a way. So what ended up happening was, again, he won, and but before the results were cut off, Bernie Sanders was in the lead by a decent margin, and Pete was not, and then all of a sudden, again, it cut off, and then the coin flipping had. So what happened then was, I believe they took the two highest scores, and they flipped a coin to decide which of the two won.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not how voting works.
I don't understand how they can do that and think that they can just get away with
Right.
literally just leaving it to
did.
chance.
That was DNC officials that did that, and they got
Yeah, I
away
don't-
with it. It's
Do you
It's
know if this
happened.
was before or after the chair of the DNC ordered a recanvass?
I'm not certain.
Okay.
All I know is that again they flip coins to decide the victor of each county, which is again rather dystopian since it's
Yeah, I
it's
believe.
just a complete functional failure of a system that was designed to allow people to have a voice. And it
Yeah,
just completely
that's
took
not
it away.
democratic. It's
It's
I
downright
think
authoritarian.
partly they most likely wanted to just they needed to get results out there. They just said, okay, we need to put something out
Now,
there.
giving them the benefit of the doubt, we would say yes, they tossed coins because it was too close, as they said. They're like, oh, we can't decide, so we're just gonna flip coins. But if you want to listen to a little bit more conspiracy theory territory, although again, not all conspiracy theories are wrong. What you would notice if you do start to believe that is that you'll again see that it's a little bit odd that once Bernie Sanders took the lead, they cut off the showing of the results, and then later we find out that Mayor Pete won,
right.
even though again he had lower votes at the time.
So
and
we're
again
just-
he's a primary investor, so it's,
To be clear, we're not trying to promote conspiracy theories
No,
here.
but
Right.
we're trying to show all the ideas and all the opinions of people,
Exactly.
at least the
That's-
main ones.
That's really what we're trying to do here. We're just examining,
Looking
we're
at the
critically
evidence.
applying.
Yeah, and you look, again, there is a very, very real room, very large amount of room for corruption in
Oh,
in
yes.
that case, because again, if you're flipping coins, and not showing
I mean,
camera the results,
There's always been corruption in politics, unfortunately.
but in this particular case, there's a lot of room for it.
Exactly. And I mean, we've seen a lot of corruption already. But this is just more than we've seen so far. Literally leaving it up to chance to decide who wins the Iowa Caucus.
Right.
Well, we hope they left it up to chance. Again,
I mean,
because
it's unacceptable.
yeah,
Right.
and no matter what, if it was purely chance, unacceptable. If
Rigged?
there were the people flipping the coins decided who won without, no matter the coin toss, they decide this is just who's going to win this vote.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, based on the video evidence, there is the camera was not shown heads or tails. It was just said aloud, this is who won.
Right.
They didn't even say heads or tails. They just flipped the coin, looked at their hand, and said candidate A or candidate B won.
Right.
They
And
never
this is
actually-
really it's an undermining of democracy, I
Right.
think.
It's not good at all.
Mhm.
And so understandably they got in a lot of heat for this. Because a lot of people they feel like their votes were not they didn't matter, and they were very upset.
Right.
And
understandably as well.
yes. And now very interestingly, this company Shadow also takes funding from the Clinton Foundation. And,
Interesting.
And from what we've been able to see before, the Clinton Foundation are not on the best of terms with Bernie Sanders' campaign.
Yep.
Yeah, because honestly, in a lot of examples, it's really just while they are, mind you, conspiracies, there's just interesting links and just little things here and there that make you wonder, like, and that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to wonder, we're trying to speculate,
Mm-hmm.
trying to examine and just see, okay, what is the evidence about this? Which is really just, I think it's a good thing to do. You can't just assume something's taken for granted. We can't just look at this and say, oh, well, Mayor Pete completely rigged it because he had a shady link to a company called Shadow. That's not what we're doing. We have to just keep a critical eye on it.
Yeah.
Also, I was just wondering if before we just unroll in a spree of elections, which are hopefully more successful, if we could just have a breakdown of really the top front runners in the race right now.
So there are a few Democrat front runners right now. So right now we have mainly Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, and then we have Amy Klobuchar.
Yeah, I don't want to focus on the ones really in the in the back
tail end.
places here. Like
Right.
these,
So Joe Biden and Amy Klobuchar.
Real quick, who do you guys think should win the Democratic nomination?
I think
who-
it's
Are you asking who we would like to win, or
Well, I think because none of them are really good decisions. But
a lot of? If you look at their policies, they're not exactly what we want.
exactly.
Just
Well, not
just
what we
starting
want
in
at
with
all.
Elizabeth Warren. She has
Quite a bit of
yeah,
crazy,
she's lied on multiple occasions, as a matter of fact.
right? Because
Yeah.
Now, who do you think is best suited to defeat Trump, if any of them, in 2020?
That's difficult. Now, I would say that potentially, it would be either Bernie Sanders or potentially Mayor Pete. Now, the reason why I think Pete is because not many people actually know his policies and what he's actually doing. So I think he could just win on nobody really knowing exactly who he is and knowing that he's just
And
not Trump.
The really thing that makes him a good contestant is that he is not a radical.
Right.
I don't think at this stage of the nation that America is ready for a radical like
However,
Bernie Sanders.
Let me
Yeah.
say, I personally think if anyone, Bernie Sanders might win, because if you look at why Trump won, one of the main reasons was because, he had a following. He had, many people, so his rallies, thousands of people showed up to his rallies. And it seemed like the Republican Party was all united under one person.
Right.
And I think if the Democrats want to win, they need that. And I think Bernie is the closest thing because
The thing is-
actually,
he's the next. He has the most, I guess, following right now because,
that may
I
be
think
true.
I think people are more willing to, show up to his rallies, and do stuff like that because that's one of the reasons why Trump won again, because he had this following. He had a large amount of people who wanted him to win, and again, I just think that Bernie is, I think out of all the Democratic nominees, he is the one that has the closest thing to a following.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I suppose, but from what I can see, Bernie Sanders, while there are many followers of him, it's just very divisive in general, because
Right.
what you have is the establishment left who are very much so against the
Right.
corporatist left is absolutely vehemently opposed to Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Right.
Because while he may have won a large portion of the vote, still there are more voters who voted against him than voted for him.
Right. Exactly.
And so, from what I can see, there seems to be a lot of divisiveness in the Democratic Party right now.
Yeah. The thing
as
is
people
that
watch it kind of collapse, they take sides, and I believe that's very good for Trump if he wishes to win. He better hope that they are divided.
Yeah, that's the thing is because as Liam is saying, in order to really give their
chance.
party a chance, they really need to come together, and they need to do basically. And the interesting thing is that you would think in 2016 that they were really more just brought together than ever by Hillary Clinton because she had certainly some very far left policies and ideals, but she was never
But she also had the support of the corporates, of the corporate enterprises.
true. And
Bernie
that's
Sanders, his tax plans would threaten large corporations, whereas she did not.
mm-hmm.
Um,
And that's
But-
the thing is that so many of them are against the establishment, and they're not only for changing it, they're for completely taking it away. They
Yeah.
think that it's not broken; it needs to be basically redone in their eyes.
Well, yes, there's a lot of revolutionary groups that have clung to the left. Many groups of the left, for example, you look at Bernie Sanders' campaign. Recently, many of the members of his campaign were exposed by Project Veritas
Mm-hmm.
for and I believe saying, and I quote, Milwaukee will burn if Bernie is not elected. And so they are very extreme in their views, and many were even saying that gulags were good. Now, for those of you who don't know, the gulags in the Soviet Union led to the deaths of millions in horrible conditions.
Right.
And to say that those are good because they claim they were a good way to remove political dissidents, which is horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So just based on that, I really hope Bernie Sanders does not win, because I do not want gulags in America.
Yeah, neither do I. I don't think anyone really
does. If you
Except for those who...
Well, most people in America don't.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why, generally, if one of them had to win, I'd probably say Pete. He seems to be...
That's what makes him so
Yeah.
appealing, is that he's not coming out
he's
swinging
not
with
as-
crazy ideas.
Yeah, he's not... Yeah, he's more moderate to an
Right.
extent. He's still very, very far to the left, but he's more moderate when compared to his more progressive counterparts in Warren and Sanders. Of course, you have Joe Biden, who's, I suppose, even more moderate than him, but
True.
I believe at this point...
And we
he's
don't
fallen
truly
out of the
want
race.
either of them. It's just it's speculation.
Yeah. You have to
So-
give him credit where credit is due. He is
Right.
the most moderate, and his economic plans are the least expensive, to the point where they're not crippling to the economy.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think we have had some excellent discussion here. We got these topics covered very well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to us here on YouTube.
Mhm.
You can as well as comment thoughts and suggestions. You can email us at thecriticalconversationpodcast@gmail.com if you would like to be featured, or if you just have any thoughts, questions.
Comments, opinions, anything like that you want to get to us more directly than through the comments section of our YouTube video.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for tuning on.